right, for those that just came in, there are two different grading sheets. You have two sheets of paper. They will have different names on them. And the next group is Team1. Nice to see you. Yeah. Fantastic, I'm ready to go. So did you guys choose this before Colin came to talk to us?
No, we didn't. We're inspired by this.
Oh, fantastic. Colin will have to come back in a week.
Yeah.
We're Team1.
Thank you. All right, Liz.
Team1. Yeah, group one.
Go ahead and start.
All right. Welcome. We're going to be talking about crossing the chasm today, which is an idea that was developed by Jeffrey Moore and talks about marketing and selling high-tech products to mainstream customers. What exactly is crossing the chasm? Let's get a little bit into that. Before we start, we have to touch a little bit on the diffusions of innovation model. Now, the diffusions of innovation model was something that was piloted by Everett Rogers and explains why, how, and the rate at which technology is adopted by a population. What he did was divide a population into 5 different groups: the innovators, early adopters, early majority, late majority, and laggards, and then show the rate and how technology, specifically discontinuous innovation, is adopted by those different groups and the points at which they make up. Now, what's the problem with that model? Well, Jeffrey Moore found a couple of problems with the diffusions of innovation model, specifically for high-tech innovations. What he found was that the model didn't quite carry over when dealing with high-tech products. What typically would happen is marketing ventures would head in the complete wrong direction when attempting to market a new product. As a result, there were unstable and shaky profits, and it often required drastic changes from management. When management finally underwent these drastic changes, they often failed miserably and the technology would disappear. So what Jeffrey Moore did was he expanded the diffusions of innovation model. He added a chasm in between the early adopters and the early majority. He also said, instead of focusing on the entire product itself, focus on each individual group and market to them directly. Come with a marketing scheme that targets each one. And then, once that group has accepted your product, you leverage that acceptance onto the next group. Now, each group has different wants and needs and likes and desires, so you have to change your marketing strategy to appeal to those different aspects of each group. Most importantly is crossing the chasm between the early adopters and the early majority. Let's quickly get into a little bit of what makes up each one of these different groups. First, you have the innovators. They're the tech enthusiasts, the ones that appreciate your product for the competitive advantage that it offers. They're the type of people that bought a VCR, bought a computer, bought a DVD player, even though it cost thousands of dollars and had tons of bugs with it. You market to these people by using forums and tech publications and going to trade conferences. Then you have the early adopters. They're the visionaries. They're the ones that have the insight to match an emerging technology to a strategic opportunity. They see your product and know exactly how to implement it and where to put it. JFK is someone like this who used the space program effectively, or Henry Ford in mass production. You market to these people by making a product out of your technology and play off the dreams of these people. Next, you have the early majority after you've crossed the chasm, and this makes up the bulk of the market. These are where the dollars lie. The people that make up the early majority and the pragmatists are people that keep a low profile, like Rod Canyon of Compaq or Bill Campbell of Go. You have to show these people that there's minimal risk in adopting your product and that it gives you small improvements. Next, you have the late majority, or the conservatives, and they represent 1/3 of the market and are against discontinuous innovation in general. People like this don't like to see things that completely change their business. John Madden is a great example of this because despite every other announcer traveling by plane, John Madden ensured that he traveled by bus to every game he went to. You have to market to this group of people by using low margins and pre-assembled packaging with absolutely no bugs at all. Finally, the last group, the laggards or the skeptics, are those that don't participate in the high-tech marketplace at all. They're the ones that will never buy into your high-tech product. In fact, these type of people say that despite the billions of dollars that have been invested in office improvements, there's been no efficiency gains at all. Instead of marketing to them in order to gain their acceptance, you simply market to them to neutralize their influence, and you have to focus on humility.
So Geoffrey Moore gave us this wonderful insight into the diffusion of innovations model, but what is the actual value of these modifications, and how do we ensure that we can cross the chasm and don't plunge into its depths? So it turns out that the main key to crossing the chasm is winning over the pragmatist, this early majority on that curve. And without the pragmatist, it's very, very difficult to get any outside support from other businesses or venture capitalists, because you don't have the enthusiasm that you need for your product. So how do we actually convince the pragmatist? That's the real question here. That's what crossing the chasm means. So it turns out that the pragmatists are generally driven by group decision making. So if they see other people using a product, they're much more likely to adopt it and trust it themselves. And if they don't see anybody using it, they're not going to bother with it. So let's just first take a look at an example of a product that really fails to cross the chasm to really understand why. And it's this idea of a transparent TV. So, there's a lot of flashy products that get put out every year. They don't necessarily solve any real-world problem. And that's really what we have with this transparent TV. They're not going to have really any problem convincing the techies and the visionaries that this product is good. Maybe this person wants to be able to see their cool wallpaper, and that's enough for them to buy the product, because they like these really cool, flashy innovations. But it isn't really solving any problems that make it worth buying. So it turns out that's not all you need. You don't just need a product that has good value. You need what Geoffrey Moore calls the whole product. And that's your generic product, whatever you're producing, with some value, but it also includes these other pieces that come from outside sources and are really only possible to achieve with some sort of outside support from businesses or venture capital. And they include things like the hardware and software that come with any device, training and support, things that really begin to you begin to incorporate into your product later on in the cycle. And without this whole product, it turns out pragmatists are really not going to be convinced to buy your product, because it's not really going to work seamlessly. It's going to require some sort of effort on their part. So we have this sort of problem where convincing the pragmatist requires the whole product. The whole product requires outside support. Outside support requires convincing pragmatists. So you've got this sort of cycle that you're stuck in. And Geoffrey Moore proposes this model of getting out of it called the bowling alley. And it's this idea that at the very beginning of this pragmatist group, you have these niche market bowling pins that you can aim for. And they're these kind of markets that have this giant problem that they need solved. And they're not really going to need the whole product to be there for them to be enthusiastic about adopting the product. So this might be education, healthcare, something where they have a big problem that they need to solve, and your product offers them the way to solve it. If you are able to knock down the first few bowling pins, this is going to generate the support you need, the venture capital support you need as well, to get into this mainstream market. And without the first few bowling pins, you're not going to be able to do that.
And now we're going to do a case study on the iPod and how it relates to crossing the chasm. So the iPod has become an object of desire, fashion innovation over the years. And it spread so virally and so quickly that I bet almost everyone in this room has owned an iPod at some point. How the iPod relates to the diffusion innovations model can be seen in this graphic right here. And as you can tell, the chasm is probably somewhere between 2005 and 2006, which is actually probably around the time when I first got my first iPod. This is another graphic that shows a little more detail on the progression of the iPod and also the different generations. And the idea of releasing new models every year really gave Apple the advantage, because people wanted to stay updated with this new technology. And as you can tell, the fourth quarter sales were doing very well, probably because it was the #1 selling item for holiday shoppers. This is the first iPod commercial, aimed towards the innovators and early adapters who were very excited about the new and emerging technology of the iPod. It synced your music on your computer, on your iTunes, with your MP3 player. And really, these are the people that understood the technology and got really excited about it. That enthusiasm for technology is shown in this commercial as this guy is really, dancing around. He's having a good time with this new technology. Crossing the chasm for the iPod. In order to cross the chasm with the iPod and spread to the mainstream, Apple the mature technology MP3 and mono was something that the early majority wanted. And that was something that appealed to the masses. It was nice, easy to use, sexy, and anyone can use it. And that's kind of shown in their advertising during this period, how anyone can have this iPod, dance around with it, and the evolution of the iPod made it really easy to apply the early majority, late majority, and the laggards. The release of new versions every year allowed the late majority and laggards to stay up to date and still remain hip and cool by the newest generation. As technology advanced, so the iPod, so when buttons became out of style, it moved to touchscreen. And that's the same idea that eventually led to the iPhone. Due to these advertising methods, nowadays when people think of the music player, they instantly think of the iPod.
And so now we get into the review portion or more interactive portion of our presentation, just to gauge the understanding of our audience. We have a couple of questions we just want to poll the audience on to test how much of the material they're able to grasp. So our first question is, Crossing the Chasm expands on what well-known theory about new ideas and technologies? A, diffusion of innovations, B, importance by forces, or C, chasm technology model? Are there any takers? Anyone wants to answer this? Yeah, go ahead. A. Yes, it is A. The diffusion that's when we first talked about earlier. Second question is, between which groups is there a chasm? A, technologists and businessmen, B, theorists and practitioners, C, early majority and early adopters. Yes, C again. This is like the crux of the entire chasm idea. And the last question, the conservatives make up which of the following groups? A, innovators, B, early adopters, and C, late majority. Yes, it's C, late majority. And so, well, given that those questions really hit on the concepts, why don't we dig into like an example, a case study. So in 2012, the serial entrepreneur Elon Musk, you've probably heard of him, he proposed a new and innovative technology that he called the Hyperloop. This is a theoretical picture of what this technology would look like. This is a hypothetical, novel, high-speed technology that claims to be the fifth mode of transportation. So cars, boats, planes, and trains being the other four. And the benefits of this new rail are that it improves safety by altogether avoiding the possibilities of crashes, handles weather significantly, in a much significantly safer manner, avoiding all those complications, and moves at twice the speed of the common airplane. And in fact, a trip from Los Angeles to San Francisco using this technology, using the Hyperloop, is expected to take 30 minutes versus a 6-hour, what would otherwise be a 6-hour car ride. So what are the questions that this technology raises, right? So in the framework of the Crossing the Chasm model that we've talked about, one of the first questions is, who are the innovators, early adopters, early majority, late majority, and laggards? And maybe we should probably open this up to the audience if anyone has any thoughts about who would fit into those different categories. Anyone?
What do you think?
Well, I think Elon Musk is definitely an innovator. But I think some of the people that he'd probably go to funding early on would be innovators and potentially early adopters.
Morgan, how would you market to each of these groups differently?
I think that the innovators and early adopters are probably people who just like the idea of going from San Francisco to LA in half an hour, rather than it being like as an implied, these aren't practice, right? Sure. So it's probably you market like, oh, this is so cool, it's so fast, you can have dinner in San Francisco and visit LA. Sure.
Yes.
There's a lot of sort of technical characteristics that they're very interested in, and afterwards it's more like after they do because everyone else does.
Right. What do you guys think about the future of this product? How do we turn this into a product the way Jeffrey Moore talked about? How do you productize something like this? After you've pitched it to the innovators and the early adopters, after you have the people that see the dream, that getting from San Francisco to LA in 6 hours, how do you turn this into a workable product? What kind of stuff do we need? Start going. Yeah.
You kind of need a niche, right? And you need people who actually have a reason to go that fast. That's the bowling alley thing.
Yeah, right. So what are some examples of these bowling pins? What are some of the niche markets that you can market this idea?
Yeah.
Maybe people who work in a different city and want to live.
Yeah, definitely. Average.
Well, using the example of California, there would be a number of companies that are small companies that have operations throughout California. So if they want quick transportation, this would be great for them because they don't have jets or planes, things like that.
Yeah, just want to say something.
So maybe people who normally fly like first class or something.
Yeah, so this is all great stuff, and you can see how Jeffrey Moore's model talks less than about the whole product itself and how we get into this adoption pattern. And so basically what you can see in terms of this and with other high-tech products that we looked at is a marketing strategy that's better than the diffusion innovation model and focuses more on how to get each part adopting your product overall.
Yeah, and furthermore, all the questions and concepts that we touched on earlier in the presentation are in fact part of this real-world evaluation